Picture a dark room. Someone reaches for a switch, flips it, and nothing happens. No light, no hum, just silence. Now cut to a massive data center. Thousands of servers glowing blue, cooling fans humming nonstop through the night, endlessly. On July 21st, 2026, the IMF looked hard at Africa's AI future and boiled the whole thing down to two numbers. The first number was 4%. The second was 0.2%. Same decade, same exact technology, completely different outcome. Both numbers try to describe exactly how much AI could grow Sub-Saharan Africa's economy over the very same 10 years. So let me ask you honestly, why would the exact same forecast swing that wildly? Better chips? Smarter algorithms, maybe? The answer isn't artificial intelligence at all, it turns out. It's a technology far older than any algorithm, plain electricity. Right now, across Sub-Saharan Africa, roughly 600 million people still live without any electricity connection reaching their homes at all. That's not some small footnote. That's 47% of the entire region's population, literally living completely in the dark tonight. Electricity isn't just light, though. It's phones charging, vaccines staying refrigerated, and hospitals actually managing to stay open at night. It's classrooms running computers, banks processing digital payments, and factories keeping their machines humming steadily through every single night, nonstop. Here's the difference, though. A light bulb survives a short blackout just fine. A data center absolutely, completely cannot handle that at all. Thousands of servers need to run continuously, 24/7, or the entire training process can quietly collapse in an instant. So picture this scene with me. One family somewhere just wants enough power to charge a single phone at home tonight. Meanwhile, just down the road, one company wants stable, uninterrupted power for a full 12,000 GPUs running around the clock. Same country, same power shortage, yet two completely different scales of electricity demand sitting uncomfortably right next to each other. So here's a real question worth asking tonight. Why doesn't AI investment spread evenly across more than 50 different African countries? Companies naturally chase whatever is already sitting there. Stable power grids, fiber cables, financial markets, and skilled technical workers mostly. South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Egypt already have most of that in place, so investment naturally keeps pulling toward them. Here's the genuinely unfair part in all this. Stable electricity attracts even more electricity, and fast internet attracts even faster internet. A place doesn't become wealthy just because it has money. It becomes wealthy because it already had conditions others wanted. Meanwhile, countries without that very early head start can quietly slide into a completely different, much harsher cycle instead, unfortunately. Frequent blackouts, expensive internet, no fresh investment, and skilled workers leaving for good. The gap only keeps widening even further. Some researchers sketch out three quite possible futures here. AI hub nations, AI consumer nations, and pure resource supplier nations only. Hubs keep most of the value locally. Consumers just rent someone else's cloud. Suppliers provide land, power, and minerals only. Let me hand you something first tonight. This coffee right here comes straight from Kenya. There's a real reason for that. Beside it, I'm also laying out two very different maps. An old colonial railway line and today's modern fiber optic cable network. Here's the thing most people genuinely miss. Colonial-era railways weren't actually built to connect every single community together equally at all. They were built almost entirely just to move minerals, coffee, and cotton from inland farms straight toward the coast, efficiently. Wherever that colonial railway physically passed through, cities and investment reliably followed close behind it. Decade after decade, almost always, a landmark economic study focused on Kenya found something genuinely striking. Those old colonial rail towns are still noticeably wealthier today. Even a full century later, well after independence and long after the railway itself faded, that spatial pattern still held firm. Now, to be clear, I'm not claiming data centers are literally colonial railways. The politics involved are obviously completely different today, but the underlying mechanism genuinely rhymes across time. Wherever infrastructure lands first often quietly shapes wealth for generations afterward, historically. So here's tonight's real question, honestly. Will these new networks connect rural clinics, or will they mostly just extract value? Now, here's a concept that sits at the very center of tonight's whole story. Something researchers actually call horizontal inequality. Vertical inequality is simple enough to grasp. It's just the income gap between one rich person and one poor person. Horizontal inequality works quite differently, though. It's the gap between entire regions, entire ethnic groups, or entire language communities instead. Researchers have actually found something genuinely uncomfortable. Horizontal inequality correlates far more strongly with civil conflict than personal poverty does. Think about it honestly for a second. Nobody starts an uprising just because their neighbor happens to be richer. But what if your entire home region has no reliable power, far worse schools, and basically zero political voice at all? I am poor quietly transforms itself into something far more dangerous. We were deliberately, systematically left behind here on purpose. Now overlay AI infrastructure onto this exact picture. Data centers claim land, water, and stable power in very specific places. High-paying jobs and specialized technical training usually end up clustering almost entirely around the capital and a handful of hubs. None of this guarantees that conflict will happen. But combined with real exclusion, it can seriously raise the underlying risk. So, does inequality really automatically explode into civil war? Let's actually test that idea against two real neighboring countries tonight. Côte d'Ivoire had a noticeably wealthier south and a much poorer, underdeveloped north for decades before its civil war began. That gap alone didn't ignite anything by itself, honestly. Plenty of economies quietly tolerate regional gaps for a long time. Then came the sharp economic crisis of the 1990s, and politicians reached for a new idea called Ivoirité, or Ivorianness. Suddenly, Northerners and people with migrant family backgrounds had their very citizenship and their voting rights openly and publicly questioned. A leading Northern politician named Alassane Ouattara found himself legally blocked from even running for that year's presidency at all. Economic exclusion fused directly with political exclusion. And that specific combination is exactly what researchers now call genuinely explosive. Now look right next door at Ghana instead. Same North-South economic gap. Even roughly the same colonial economic history, honestly. But Ghana's political parties actually kept sharing power and representation across regions for years, instead of shutting entire groups out. Ghana never fully solved its inequality problem either. But people there could still genuinely believe the state was theirs too. Same underlying wealth gap, two very different outcomes. What seemed to matter most was who actually got a political voice. Now, let's turn our attention to Sudan, a country whose long, painful conflicts go far beyond ethnicity or religion alone. For decades now, political and economic power stayed heavily concentrated around Khartoum and the fertile core region of the Nile. Darfur, the south, and the east all consistently saw fewer schools, fewer hospitals, and dramatically less political representation over time. Here's the cruel twist researchers point to. A government too weak to deliver services could still somehow collect taxes there. One major UNDP study found something troubling. Long, high-intensity conflicts can still actually widen regional inequality gaps even further afterward, which sets up a brutal cycle. Inequality fuels conflict, conflict destroys schools and hospitals, and destruction fuels even more inequality. If AI infrastructure enters that same loop, it could sharpen government surveillance long before it ever improves basic public services. To be clear, this isn't some proven, guaranteed outcome yet. It's a documented risk pattern researchers are actively tracking. Still, the underlying pattern here is hard to miss. Watch closely which regions get connected and which ones stay quietly dark. Let's get a little philosophical for just a moment here, because this question actually runs much deeper than infrastructure alone. Economist Amartya Sen argued that real freedom isn't about simply owning things. It's about what you can actually do. Electricity itself really isn't freedom. But without it, dozens of other everyday freedoms quietly become nearly impossible to reach at all. Studying safely at night, getting treated properly at a clinic, running a small business, all of it needs power first. There's also a fast-growing field called energy justice, which asks three sharp questions about literally every power decision ever made. Who actually receives the benefits? Who gets a real say in where infrastructure gets built? And whose needs even count? Philosopher Iris Marion Young adds something genuinely chilling here. Injustice doesn't always require one single, clearly identifiable villain to exist. A company simply picks the safest market available to it. A bank funds the surest possible profit. Nobody intends real harm. Yet somehow, after every single rational decision made along the way, that same village never quite gets connected to power. So which future is Africa really actually heading toward right now? Let's picture two very different possible endings together tonight. Future 1, the digital fortress. Data centers run entirely on their own private power, sealed completely off from everyone else. Surrounding villages stay completely dark. Foreign firms keep nearly all the profits, and local jobs stay short-term, temporary, and small. Future 2, the anchor of development instead. That same power investment also reaches nearby rural clinics and local schools too. The IMF itself suggests this quite directly. Pairing large data center power deals with mini-grid investments for surrounding communities nearby, Africa has genuinely leapfrogged before. Mobile money skipped traditional bank branches entirely and still reached hundreds of millions of people. AI infrastructure could realistically follow that exact same leapfrogging path, if the right choices actually get made early enough. One final thought before we go tonight. The first real right of the AI age might not be AI access itself. It might simply be the right to turn on the lights. So, after everything, who do you think deserves that first? That's a wrap for today. So, tell me honestly, after everything we just covered, who do you think gets the lights first?